30 seconds before they closed the coffin, Mary Smith saw something no eye wanted to see. Anthony Matthews's chest subtly rose, like a shy wave unwilling to die. The murmur of the hall shattered in her ear like glass. The candles smelled of chrysanthemums and paraffin, and the perfect widow, Beatrice Albright, held a silk handkerchief that never truly dampened. The master of ceremonies prepared the final prayer, when Mary, in her light blue uniform and hands trembling inside her gloves, leaned over the mahogany edge. She breathed, whispered first, doubting herself, then swallowed hard. "Sir," he breathed. No one heard her, or perhaps everyone chose not to hear. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. We're continuing. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear. The afternoon had fallen over Mayfair with that grey sky that tightens the chest. The Matthews mansion was filled with flowers. White arrangements arrived with cards from bankers, politicians, old friends who only remembered Anthony in his public victories and not in his private defeats. A string quartet played classical music softly. On the main table, a huge portrait of Anthony in a navy blue suit with a tired gaze seemed to observe everything from another world. And yet that world still held him. Mary had been cleaning that house for 8 years. She knew which portrait warped with humidity, which step creaked before the library, which flower Mr. Anthony preferred in November. She also knew that the gentleman did not tolerate the bitter taste of certain pills, and that when Mrs. Beatrice began to organize his medicine cabinet, Anthony would have a trace of bitterness on his lips after each meal, details as invisible as she was. And yet, it was this eye trained on the minute, on the drop of wax staining the tablecloth, on the dust hiding under the piano, that detected the miracle, a slight tremor at the corner of the millionaire's mouth. "It can't be," she told herself, fixing her gaze. "I can't be mistaken now." Around her, conversations intertwined between pious rumors and poorly disguised curiosity. Edward Taylor, the family lawyer and too intimate a friend of Beatrice, paced back and forth reviewing papers with a solemn gesture. For Mary, one glance was enough to feel the thread of danger. The man wore his mourning too perfectly, as if he had rehearsed every sigh. "Mrs. Albright," Mary dared, approaching respectfully. "Forgive me, but it seemed to me that Mr. Anthony—" Beatrice pierced her with those large, cold green eyes and rested a delicate hand on the coffin, as if caressing her husband one last time. "Thank you, Mary," she whispered without really looking at her. "You don't need to clean anything else today. You may withdraw to the back." The tone was sweet on top like syrup, underneath sharp as a razor. Mary stepped back but did not obey. Something didn't fit. The doctor had recommended immediate cremation. Edward was speeding up the procedures. Beatrice smiled for the press with perfectly photogenic grief. And now this breath, a single, light, insufficient one, yet enough to turn destiny. The master of ceremonies asked for silence. The violins fell silent. Only the steps of the men approaching to close the lid were heard. 30 seconds. Mary looked at Anthony's face. A minimal sheen moistened the corner of his eye. Wax from a candle dripped onto the edge, as if time itself was melting. She, who her whole life had learned not to interfere, then felt an impulse that did not come from her own strength, but from that silent voice that sometimes wakes her at dawn and reminds her, "You were not born to see injustices and sweep them under the rug." The story didn't begin that day. In fact, it started months ago, when Anthony, fed up with arguments and silences, decided to revise his will. Mary overheard him by chance cleaning the hallway. "I don't want any more masks near my money," the millionaire said in a low voice, looking out the window at the jacaranda trees. Behind this decision came Beatrice's haste to care for his health. And the trusted doctor, a respectable name Mary barely managed to hear, began visiting the house with a discretion that smelled foul. The pills, the bitterness, the fatigue, and then the night of the heart attack. Now, in front of the coffin, the central theme of this story beat like a drum in Mary's chest. When the powerful tell you what you must see, someone humble has to remind them of what they don't want to look at. Betrayal, money, a love that withered without ever blooming, and the possibility of a miracle. In Mary's mind, intrigue ignited like fire. What was really happening to Anthony? Why such haste to bid him farewell, to cremate him? What truth needed to be erased with the smoke of a furnace? Mary whispered to Nina, the cook, pulling her by the elbow. "Don't get involved. This is not our business, Nina. Mary's eyes shone. If I'm wrong, I'll be silent forever. But if not, a life depended on those seconds. Beatrice thanked the attendees with a superb inclination and stopped near Edward, who adjusted her shawl. Mary observed them sideways. Between his fingers, Edward hid his phone with the screen semi-lit, reading a message whose header she managed to glimpse reflected on his watch. Certificate ready. Death certificate, cremation, all too fast, too clean, like those floors that smell of chlorine to disguise the dampness of mold. At the far end of the hall, a child let out a sob. Someone coughed. A candle crackled. The master lifted the lid a little higher to adjust it, and for a second Anthony's face was exposed at Mary's eye level. There she saw clearly. A minimal pulsation vibrated in the vein of his neck, almost invisible. Mary didn't think about her contract, what they would say, the laughter of the suited men. She thought of the first time her mother told her that a poor person's greatest value is their conscience. "Wait!" Her voice came out hoarse but firm. "Don't close it!" The murmur exploded. Edward grimaced in annoyance. "Mrs. Albright, please," he said. "How much more are we going to tolerate?" "One moment," Beatrice interrupted, still with that poisoned sweetness. "What is it now, Mary?" "He's breathing," she said, and the word floated like a sin. The guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. A man crossed himself. Beatrice laughed briefly, a toothless laugh. "I understand your pain, Mary," she whispered. "Sometimes simple people cling to miracles because reality is harsh, but it's time to say goodbye." Reality. The word fell heavy. For Beatrice, reality was a well-rehearsed narrative. For Mary, reality lay in the details, in the misplaced dropper she saw the night before when mopping the room, in the pillbox that appeared empty overnight, in the doctor who avoided looking her in the eyes, in the indecent haste to light the crematorium furnace, and now in that breath. Stories that seek our hearts, those of love, faith, betrayal, and revenge, begin with a choice: to be silent or to speak. Mary had been silent too many times. That afternoon she chose something else. "Give me 30 seconds, she asked, looking at the pallbearers. 30. If I'm wrong, I'll leave the house without my rights, but if I tell the truth—" "Enough," Edward cut in, stepping forward. "There are protocols here." "And there are also lives," Mary retorted, holding his gaze. "Or are you in a hurry, Doctor?" A murmur of electricity ran through the hall. Beatrice clutched her handkerchief until her knuckles turned white. On the old pendulum clock in the room, the one Mary cleaned with a special cloth, the second hand began its final dance. Tick-tock, tick. The master of ceremonies hesitated. The pallbearers exchanged glances. 30, 29, 28. Mary brought her face inches from Anthony's skin. She sought the vapor, the tremor, the sign of God or destiny. 7:26. She remembered the day Anthony told her, "Thank you for a warm coffee at midnight." 25. She remembered her mother's voice. "When in doubt, look twice." 24. The world narrowed until it came down to the vein in that man's neck, and then she heard it again. A faint exhalation. "He's alive." She said it with the certainty that only comes when fear shatters. The hall froze. Edward turned pale. Beatrice took a step back, just an inch, as if the truth pushed her. If you're feeling your heart tighten like hers, subscribe to the channel. It's very important for our channel. And tell us in the comments what country you're listening from. Now take a deep breath, because this is just beginning. The hall fell silent, as if the breath that had just left Anthony's body had absorbed all the air. No one moved. The flowers suddenly smelled too strong, and the echo of Mary's voice resounded between the high walls. "He's alive." Beatrice, motionless in front of the coffin, tried to compose herself. Her perfect face subtly trembled, like porcelain about to crack. "This is impossible," she murmured, smiling toothlessly, seeking Edward's gaze. "Say something, please." Edward advanced with firm steps, his black suit impeccable, his hands clasped in an almost priestly gesture. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced in a grave tone, "nerves and grief can play tricks on us. No one is alive here." And without looking at Mary, he added, "Someone remove her, please." 2 funeral service employees approached, but Mary stepped back and raised her voice. "If you don't believe me, come closer. Put your fingers here." The men stopped. Beatrice clutched her handkerchief, white with rage. But then one of the pallbearers, young and dark-haired, hesitantly approached. extended his hand and placed it on the millionaire's neck. A silence, then another, and the young man abruptly withdrew his hand. "Madam," he stammered, frightened, "I felt something." The murmur exploded like a spark. Several guests rose, some crossed themselves, others pulled out their cell phones. Beatrice screamed, "Enough! We won't turn this into a circus." But it was too late. The tension had taken hold of everyone. The master of ceremonies stepped away, and the background music stopped without anyone ordering it. Mary, trembling, rested her hand on Anthony's chest. She felt a faint movement, almost a sigh. Her soul rose to her throat. "Bring a doctor," she said. "Now!" "I'm here," a voice from the back replied. It was the hospital doctor, Dr. Felix Goodwin, a family friend. He walked calmly to the coffin, but his expression was not that of a surprised man. It was that of someone who fears being discovered. "Excuse me," he said with a technical gesture. "Let's check again." Mary watched him carefully. When he brought the stethoscope closer, she saw the slight tremor in his hands. She knew what was happening. It wasn't a mistake, it was a cover-up. "Well?" Beatrice asked, her voice sharp. "There are no vital signs," the doctor replied, avoiding Mary's gaze. "Lie!" she shouted, stepping forward. "You're not listening to him." "You're scared." Edward interposed himself threateningly. "Silence, madam. If you continue making a scene, I'll call security." Mary looked at him with a fire she didn't even know she possessed. "Call whoever you want, but you won't silence the truth." The silence became unbearable. Beatrice, desperate, leaned over the coffin. Her perfume filled the air, and then, to everyone's horror, Anthony's body moved its lips. A faint, hoarse groan escaped his throat. The cry that came from the crowd was unanimous. Some women fell to their knees. The pallbearer dropped the coffin. Edward recoiled 2 steps, pale as wax. "My God," someone whispered. The doctor stood paralyzed, not knowing what to do. Mary reacted first, pushed away the flowers, loosened the millionaire's tie, and brought her ear to his chest. "He's breathing. He's weak, but he's breathing." Anthony murmured something unintelligible. Beatrice put her hands to her head, feigning a faint. Edward rushed to support her. "Get everyone out of here," the doctor ordered, his voice between fear and fury. "I need space." Mary refused to leave. "You won't kill him again, doctor." Felix looked at her with hatred. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I know what they gave him," she retorted. "I saw the pills Mrs. Albright brought. They swapped them a month ago." The doctor swallowed hard. Edward turned around with wide eyes. "This is madness." But the sound of a distant siren interrupted the scene. One of the neighbors, hearing the shouts, had called emergency services. In less than 5 minutes, the mansion was filled with paramedics. Mary stepped back, giving space, but without taking her eyes off Anthony. When the nurses confirmed his pulse, a murmur swept through the room like wind through leaves. "He's alive. Mr. Matthews is alive." Beatrice tried to leave the hall, but a nurse stopped her. "Madam, please wait here." Her mask broke for an instant. She looked at Mary with a pure, unmistakable hatred and whispered as she passed her, "Oh, you don't know what you've done, servant." Mary didn't reply. She just watched as the paramedics lifted the stretcher with Anthony, still unconscious, into the ambulance. She had won a battle, but not the war. As the ambulance drove away, the murmurs grew. No one knew what to say. Edward picked up his phone, sending messages with trembling hands. The doctor wiped sweat from his forehead. Mary, alone in the middle of the crowd, felt her legs weaken. Relief and fear mingled in her chest. She had saved a life, but she had touched the secrets of the rich, and that always comes at a price. That night, when she returned to her small service room, she heard light knocks on the door. It was Nina, the cook, with a terrified look. "Mary, don't say anything about what happened today." Her voice trembled. "The madam is furious. They say they'll fire you tomorrow." Mary sat on the bed, exhausted, looked at her hands still stained with dust from the coffin, and murmured, "I don't care, Nina. I can't be silent anymore. If God showed me this, it was for a reason." Outside, the city slept, but inside the Matthews mansion, the war had just begun. The sound of sirens still resonated when the Matthews mansion became empty. The ambulance had taken Anthony, and the guests dispersed in silence, avoiding eye contact. No one wanted to be associated with the scandal. Only Beatrice, Edward, and Mary remained before an altar of withered flowers and untouched wine glasses. "This won't stand," Beatrice said with a chilling calm. "What you did today was unforgivable." Mary looked at her directly for the first time. "Unforgivable is what you did to him." Edward tried to intervene, but Beatrice's expression stopped him. She took the black veil from her shoulders and took a few slow steps toward the woman. "You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into, young lady. Here people like you don't win. Then for me it doesn't matter," Mary replied. "I already won by seeing him breathe." The silence was so heavy it could be cut with a knife. Beatrice offered a bitter smile. "Enjoy it while you can." The next day the news was already in the papers. Millionaire businessman declared dead wakes up at his funeral. The photos showed Beatrice leaving the mansion with dark glasses, Dr. Goodwin's face hidden behind the ambulance, and a figure in the background that few noticed, Mary holding rosary beads in her hands. The media spoke of a miracle, but Mary knew that miracles don't smell of poison or money. She spent the entire day in her room, not daring to go out. The phone rang several times, but she didn't answer. As evening fell, she heard knocks on the door. It was Nina with red eyes. "They're going to kick you out, Mary. They say you made it all up, that you jeopardized the family's reputation." "I don't care. What matters is that he lives. What if he dies again?" the cook whispered, crossing her arms. "What if they make him disappear at the hospital?" That sentence drove a thorn into her heart. Mary jumped up. "Where is he hospitalized?" "At St. Bartholomew's Hospital in Smithfield. But they won't let you in." Mary grabbed her purse, put away her rosary beads, an old notebook, and a coat. "Then I'll go in where they can't see me." That night the city shone under the rain. Puddles reflected car lights, and the traffic noise seemed to mark an accelerated pulse, just like the one she had felt on Anthony's neck. She walked to the hospital and from the corner saw it. The white building, the closed windows, 2 guards at the entrance. One of them was talking to a man in a dark suit, Edward Taylor. The lawyer smoked in the rain, looking at his phone. He seemed nervous. Mary hid behind a taxi and watched him. She heard him murmur something on the phone. "Yes, everything is under control. No one knows about the pills. The doctor has already signed what's necessary. Tomorrow we'll transfer him." Transfer. That word chilled her blood. If they planned to move Anthony, it was because they wanted to ensure he died this time. Mary waited for Edward to leave and then crossed the street. She looked for a side door, the one for the maintenance area. She knew how to move silently. Years of cleaning floors had taught her not to leave traces. She slipped stealthily through the service corridor and walked through shadows until she saw a door with a sign, "ICU, restricted access." She stopped. She held her breath. Inside, a single guard slept in a chair. "Forgive me, sir," she whispered. "But I have to do this." She entered silently. The smell of disinfectant was strong. Monitors flickered. In the bed with tubes and dressings lay Anthony. His pale skin shone under the cold hospital light. Mary approached slowly, took his hand. "No one will believe me, Mr. Anthony, but you have to open your eyes. You have to do this for justice." His eyelids moved. Just a gesture, but enough for her to feel a shiver. Suddenly the door opened. Mary turned around. Dr. Goodwin was there with a folder in his hand. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice dry. "I just wanted to make sure he's okay." "You don't need to be sure of anything," he said, closing the door behind him. "This patient will not receive any more visitors." Mary stepped back. The doctor approached, and on his face there was no longer any trace of kindness. "You don't understand how this world works. Some lives are worth more than others. And you decided which ones," she replied defiantly. The doctor smiled cynically. "I merely obey orders." Mary's throat felt dry. "From Beatrice." The man didn't reply, but his eyes said everything. She took a step back, feigning calm. "Then tell her he's still breathing, and that the dead, when they return, tend to speak." She left the room before he could react. Outside, the rain fell harder. She walked aimlessly to the bus stop, drenched, but with her head ablaze. She knew she couldn't stop. If she had saved Anthony's life once, now she had to protect it from those who wanted to finish the job. And at that moment, unknowingly, Mary ceased to be the invisible cleaner and became the only witness who could destroy Beatrice Albright. Dawn arrived grey, with a fine drizzle that soaked the streets and washed away the traces of the previous night. Mary hadn't slept. She spent the hours sitting in the kitchenette of her small room, watching the clock and replaying every word from the doctor in her mind. I merely obey orders. She knew what that meant. Beatrice wanted to ensure Anthony would never open his eyes again. She drank a bitter coffee, quickly combed her hair and headed for the hospital. But upon arriving, something had changed. 2 new guards stood watch at the ICU entrance. When she tried to pass, one of them extended his arm. "I'm sorry, madam. Restricted access. I'm from the cleaning service. I worked for the family," she tried to explain. "I just want to leave this." She showed a small pouch with rosary beads and a folded envelope. "It's a message for Mr. Matthews." The guard looked at her suspiciously. "Leave it here, we'll deliver it." Mary hesitated. If she left it, it might never reach him. She thought for a second and feigned a stumble. "Oh, excuse me." And as the man bent down to pick up the fallen rosary beads, she slid the envelope under the door of the restricted area. Inside, a nurse found it minutes later. The envelope simply read, "If he wakes up, don't leave him alone. Don't trust his wife." Mary walked away in the rain with her heart pounding. She knew she had risked too much, but she also knew that fear could no longer stop her. At the mansion, Beatrice Albright looked at the newspaper cover. Her perfect frozen face filled the photo. The miracle of the businessman who returned to life. She slammed the table in fury. "Imbeciles," she shouted, throwing the coffee cup against the wall. Edward tried to calm her. "We've already controlled the media. They're saying it was just a medical error." "And the maid?" Beatrice asked with bloodshot eyes. "Where is Mary?" "She disappeared after the funeral." Beatrice smiled coldly. "Then we'll find her." Edward hesitated. "Beatrice, all of this is getting out of control. If Anthony wakes up and speaks, he won't wake up." She stood up, lighting a cigarette. "Felix will know what to do." She approached the window, watching the rain hit the panes. Her reflection returned the image of a woman who no longer cried, only calculated. "When this is over, Edward, you and I will leave here." The lawyer nodded, though a shadow of fear crossed his face. He had begun to realize that Beatrice was not just ambitious. She was capable of anything. Meanwhile, at St. Bartholomew's Hospital, Anthony Matthews opened his eyes. The white light blinded him at first. He didn't remember where he was or why his body hurt so much. He tried to speak, but only a sigh escaped. A nurse rushed to him. "Mr. Matthews," calmly, "you are in the hospital. You had a collapse, but you are stable." "My wife," he murmured. "She'll come later, sir." Anthony closed his eyes, trying to order his memories. Confused images mingled in his mind. Dinner, wine, Beatrice smiling, a bitter taste. And then darkness. Suddenly, an inner voice whispered something to him. 30 seconds before they closed the coffin. He didn't understand where this phrase came from, but it made him shiver. He asked for paper and a pen. With a trembling hand, he wrote a name. "Mary." The nurse looked at him surprised. "Who is Mary?" "The woman who saved me." That afternoon, Mary returned to the mansion. She couldn't sit idly by. She needed proof, something to demonstrate what Beatrice and the doctor had done. The gate was ajar. She walked cautiously through the garden, where the funeral flowers remained withered. Upon entering, the silence was total. She went up the stairs to the main bedroom. Everything was impeccable, as if nothing had happened. But on the bedside table, she saw something that shouldn't have been there. An open medicine box, and next to it a prescription signed by Dr. Goodwin. She took out her cell phone and took pictures. Then she opened the box. Inside, several capsules with a crystalline substance different from the usual pills. At that moment, she heard footsteps. Mary hid behind the curtains exactly when Edward Taylor entered. "Beatrice, are you up there?" he asked. He received no answer. He walked to the dressing table and put the box in his briefcase. "We can't leave traces," Mary murmured. She watched him from the shadows, holding her breath. When he left, she waited a few seconds and ran down the stairs. She knew those photos were her only defense if everything went wrong. She pressed her phone against her chest. "Now I have proof," she whispered. But as she crossed the door, a black car braked abruptly in front of her. From the vehicle, a tall man with an umbrella descended. "Mary Smith?" he asked in a neutral tone. "Who's asking?" The man showed a badge. "Detective Jonas Rivers. I'm investigating Mr. Matthews's case." For an instant, she thought it was a trap, but the man's voice seemed sincere. "What do you want to know?" "Everything." He looked her in the eyes. "Because something tells me what happened in that coffin was an attempted murder." Mary clutched the rosary beads in her pocket. Fear struck her again, but this time she didn't feel alone. Someone else believed her truth. "Then listen carefully, Detective," she said. "I'll tell you how it all began." Detective Jonas Rivers observed her with a mix of patience and distrust. His face was marked by the years, and his overcoat was drenched with rain. Mary looked at him without blinking, knowing it was her only chance for someone to believe her. "It all started before the heart attack," she said in a low voice. "Anthony Matthews wasn't sick. They poisoned him little by little." The detective took out a notepad. "Who?" "His wife and Dr. Felix Goodwin." Mary took a deep breath. "And perhaps the lawyer, Edward Taylor, too." Jonas wrote without judgment. "Do you have proof?" Mary took out her phone with trembling hands. She showed him the photos of the pills and the signed prescription in the room. The detective watched the screen carefully. "This might be enough for a search warrant," he murmured. "But if they're as powerful as you say, they'll try to erase everything." "They're already doing it," she replied. "They're planning to take him out of the hospital." Jonas put away his notepad. "Then we need to act fast." Meanwhile, at St. Bartholomew's Hospital, Anthony Matthews tried to order his memories. Every breath hurt, but his mind was beginning to awaken. He remembered the last dinner. Beatrice laughing, her sweet perfume, the glass of wine she insisted on serving him. He remembered a sudden dizziness and the blurred face of the doctor approaching. Then darkness. Now every time he closed his eyes, he saw the face of a woman in a blue uniform crying beside the coffin. 30 seconds before they closed the coffin, Mary whispered. The nurse heard him and approached. "Mr. Matthews, I need to speak with this woman." "She knows the truth," the nurse nodded. "There's someone who left a message for you," she said. Handing him the paper Mary had slipped under the door hours earlier. It said not to trust his wife. Anthony read it in silence. For the first time, a spark of anger ignited in his gaze. So I was right. That night, Beatrice arrived at the hospital dressed in black. She wore dark glasses and carried a bouquet of white flowers. She greeted the staff with her perfect widow's smile. "I came to see my husband," she said sweetly. The guards let her pass. She walked down the corridor with firm steps, but inside her purse, along with her perfume and gloves, she carried a small syringe wrapped in a handkerchief. Dr. Goodwin was waiting for her in the room. "Are you sure no one will see us?" she asked. "The nurse on duty has been sent for her break," the doctor replied. "We have 10 minutes." Beatrice approached the bed. Anthony was asleep, connected to tubes. She looked at him with contempt and false tenderness. "You could have had everything, but you decided to betray me," she whispered, stroking his cheek. "Too bad miracles last so little." The doctor nodded, preparing the syringe. But just as he leaned over Anthony's arm, the door burst open. "Police!" a male voice shouted. It was Jonas Rivers, with 2 agents behind him. Beatrice turned, startled. "What does this mean?" The detective showed a warrant. "Investigation for attempted murder. Dr. Goodwin, drop that." The doctor hesitated, but before he could react, one of the agents disarmed him. The syringe fell to the floor and rolled to Beatrice's feet. She took a step back, trembling, and suddenly began to cry. "You don't understand. I loved him. He wanted to leave me with nothing." Mary, who had arrived behind the police officers, heard her from the doorway. "Love him?" she asked in a firm voice. "You poisoned him, Beatrice. You were going to burn him alive." Beatrice looked at her with fury, her eyes full of black tears from her makeup. "And what do you know about love?" "You were just his maid." "Yes," Mary replied, approaching. "But I was the one who supported him when he stopped breathing. I was the one who believed in him when everyone thought he was dead. That's more love than you'll ever feel in your entire life." Beatrice screamed, trying to advance on her, but the agent stopped her. The doctor was also handcuffed. Jonas collected the syringe with a handkerchief. "We'll have what we need to prove it," he said. Hours later, the hospital calmed down. Mary stayed by Anthony's bedside. For the first time, he opened his eyes completely. "You," he murmured. "Yes, sir." "I'm Mary, the one who wouldn't let them close the coffin." Anthony looked at her with astonishment and a gratitude that needed no words. "Thank you," he whispered. "You gave me my life back." She smiled slightly humbly. "Don't thank me. It was God who made me look twice." The monitors beeped softly. Outside, dawn was breaking again. Mary thought of everything she had lived through. The fear, the lies, the injustice. But she also thought of something new growing within her. Strength. Jonas appeared at the door. "Mrs. Albright is detained," he said. She confessed everything. Your testimony will be crucial in the trial. Mary nodded, looking at Anthony. So this is over. The detective corrected her with a slight smile. No, Mrs. Smith, this is just beginning. The powerful don't accept losing so easily. And he was right. Because as the sun entered through the hospital window, someone else watched from a black car parked in front of the building, a figure with an expensive watch and a cigarette between his fingers. Edward Taylor started the car, dialed a number, and said into the phone, "The plan has changed. Beatrice is down. But now there's another one who knows too much." A few miles away, a hitman received the message on an old cell phone. St. Bartholomew's Hospital. Her and him. Before dawn. The war against the truth had not ended. It was just taking shape. Night slid over the city with a strange calm, too silent to be real. Inside the hospital, the corridors darkened one by one as nurses changed shifts. Mary remained by Anthony's bedside, fighting sleep with a cup of cold coffee in her hands. She couldn't get the image of that photo out of her head. Her son, the market. Do they know who I am? Where I live? She murmured, almost voiceless. I shouldn't have gotten involved in this. Anthony, weak but conscious, watched her. Don't say that. If it weren't for you, I'd be dead now. And if it weren't for me, you'd be safe in your home without enemies. She sighed, trembling. I just wanted to do what was right. You did what few would do, he replied with serenity. And that has a price, I know. But I won't leave you alone. Mary smiled sadly. It's not the first time I've been left alone, Mr. Matthews. I'm used to it. Anthony wanted to reply, but the sound of thunder interrupted them. Outside, the rain had returned. Drops hit the windows insistently, as if the sky was trying to warn them of something. Suddenly, a flicker in the lights made the room tremble. The monitors failed. The power's out? Mary asked, uneasy. It must be the generator, Anthony said, though his voice sounded unsure. But generators don't usually fail twice, and the distant sound of footsteps echoing in the corridor chilled her blood. Mary peered out. In the distance, a man in a cap walked slowly, almost dragging his feet. He wore a dark jacket, wet from the rain. When he passed under the intermittent light, she saw the metallic glint of something in his hand. A gun. She ran to the door, closing it forcefully and turning the lock. Sir, there's someone here, she whispered. Anthony tried to get up, but the pain forced him to lie down. Call security. Mary picked up the room phone, but the line was dead. Without thinking twice, she pushed a table against the door. They found us, Anthony said. He took a deep breath, seeking calm. Listen, Mary. In the nightstand drawer, there's an emergency button. Press it. She searched for it and pressed it hard. A silent alarm lit up on the corridor panel, but the guards were too far away to hear it. The footsteps stopped right in front of the door. A dry knock made her tremble. Open up, a deep voice shouted from the other side. I'm from maintenance. Mary shook her head. Don't open, sir, don't open. The man knocked again, harder. The lock vibrated. She recoiled, looking for something to defend herself with. She grabbed a metal tray and a scalpel from the nursing cart. The knocking continued. Open now or it will be worse. Anthony looked at the window. The room has an emergency exit, he said with difficulty, but it leads to the floor below. Then we'll jump, she replied. You can't carry me. Of course I can, she retorted, her eyes ablaze. I already carried you in my soul when everyone gave you up for dead. The lock gave way. The door opened partially. The hitman showed his face covered by shadow. Mary threw the tray with all her might, hitting the hand holding the gun. The shot ricocheted off the ceiling. Anthony cried out, and she took advantage of the second of distraction to push the assailant with the cart. Run, she said, holding the stretcher. They went out the window under the rain. Mary descended the emergency ladder with one of Anthony's arms over her shoulders. Behind them, the sound of hurried footsteps pursued them. Don't let go, he said, panting. I don't intend to. They reached the second floor. The ladder ended in an inner courtyard, empty and dark. Mary sought refuge in a cleaning supply room. The two hid there, breathing heavily. Anthony took her hand. Why are you doing this? You could run away. Save yourself. Mary looked him in the eyes. Because you were the first to see me. My whole life I was invisible, and when no one heard my voice, you breathed. That's enough. He tried to smile, but his face tensed. If we get out of this, I swear I'll get justice for all those who were silenced. Mary nodded. and I'll accompany you until the end." The sound of sirens sounded again in the distance. Someone had seen the shooting and called the police. The hitman disappeared into the shadows, but they knew Edward Taylor wouldn't stop. When at last the paramedics found them, Mary was drenched, her uniform stained with blood and mud, but alive. Anthony looked at her as they placed him on the stretcher. "You are braver than anyone I've ever known," he said in a weak voice. She squeezed his hand. "I am not brave, I just don't have fear anymore." And at that instant, as dawn began to break through the clouds, Mary understood that her life would never be the same again. She had survived power, silence, and death. Now she had to survive the truth. Dawn broke through the buildings of Smithfield like a golden wound. Sunbeams timidly entered through the blinds of the new room, where Anthony Matthews was recovering under police custody. The smell of disinfectant and old coffee filled the air. Mary, sitting by the window, hadn't slept. Her body ached, but her soul burned more than ever. Since the attack had failed, Edward Taylor was on the run. The police were looking for him, but the man was cunning. He knew the loopholes in the system, the shadows where to hide. Detective Jonas Rivers entered the room with his usual tired expression. "Good morning." He took off his hat and left it on the table. "We have news." Mary stood up, expectant. "Did you find him?" "Not yet," he replied, "but we found his office empty and the files erased. We know there was a money laundering network behind all this." "Anthony, you were about to expose it, weren't you?" The millionaire nodded gravely. "Yes, Beatrice, Edward, and other businessmen used my foundations to move dirty money. When I refused to sign the contracts, they decided to remove me. And they would have succeeded," Mary added, "if God hadn't made me look twice." The detective looked at her with respect. "Sometimes miracles come disguised as courage," he said, "but the network they operated doesn't stop with one arrest. It's vast. If Taylor decides to speak, many will fall, or someone will silence him first." Anthony closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. "So I must speak? Give my public testimony." Mary watched him with concern. "That's dangerous, sir." "Silence is too," he retorted, "and we've already paid too dearly for it." That same afternoon, as the sun began to set, the hospital filled with cameras and journalists. The news had leaked. The millionaire who resurrected would tell the truth. Jonas organized security. Mary, uneasy, helped prepare the room where Anthony would give his statement. "Are you sure about this?" she asked him. Anthony looked at her with a serenity only possessed by those who have faced death. "There's no turning back. If I stay silent, they win." When the reporters entered, the lights flashed like lightning. Anthony sat in front of the microphones. Mary, in the background, watched him with a heavy heart. "Good afternoon," he began. "I was the victim of an attempted assassination planned by people I trusted. My wife, Beatrice Albright, and my lawyer, Edward Taylor. But behind them, there is something darker, a network of power that corrupts everything it touches." The murmur of the press filled the air. Anthony continued, "Today I am alive thanks to someone everyone considered invisible. A woman who had no money, no degree, no important surname. Mary Smith," he paused. "She saw what no one wanted to see, and thanks to that I'm here." Flashes illuminated her face. Mary lowered her gaze with discreet tears. She wasn't used to being named in front of cameras. "I hope this story serves as a reminder," Anthony said, "that worth is not measured in bank accounts but in conscience." The applause was instantaneous. Some journalists even stood up. But in the middle of the crowd, a figure in a cap and dark jacket watched from the back without applauding. His gaze was cold, calculating. Edward Taylor. That night, Mary and Anthony were transferred to a hotel under police protection, but the danger still breathed between them. Mary took a shower, trying to calm the tremor in her hands. When she came out, Detective Jonas was waiting for her in the corridor. "Taylor is in the city." He was seen near the hospital before the conference. "Then he'll come after us," she said. "Perhaps." Jonas looked at his watch. "But not today. He's cornered, and when a rat is cornered, it bites." Mary clutched the rosary beads. "And what do we do in the meantime?" "To wait and pray if you believe in that." She smiled faintly. "I no longer pray for miracles, Detective. Only for justice." Hours later, Anthony couldn't sleep. He looked at the city from the hotel window. The car lights looked like ghosts moving between the avenues. He thought of everything he had lost: his company, his wife, his reputation. But he had gained something money had never given him, a second life. Mary approached with a blanket. "You need to rest." "I can't," he said. "I feel like something's going to happen." She sat beside him. "The worst is over. I thought that before I died." Their gazes met. There was a silence full of gratitude and fear, but also a new, inexplicable connection. Anthony carefully took her hand. "If I don't get out of this, promise me something." "Don't say that." "Promise," he insisted, "that you won't let them take your faith or your voice." Mary nodded, her eyes moist. "I promise, but you won't die again." Thunder rumbled in the distance. In the corridor, security cameras recorded a movement, a shadow sliding down the hotel's service stairs. Edward Taylor hadn't fled. He had returned to finish what he started. The hotel clock struck 2 a.m. when Destiny knocked on the door again, silent and sharp. Outside, the storm roared with an ancient fury, striking the windows with the same insistence as a heart about to explode. Mary woke with a start. She didn't know why, but something inside her screamed that they weren't alone. She slowly got up, barefoot, and opened the door to the main room where Anthony slept. The corridor light flickered. He slept restlessly, sweating. On the nightstand, a copy of the previous day's newspaper. "The millionaire who resurrected speaks of corruption." Suddenly, a dry noise made her turn. It came from the corridor. Very slow, calculated footsteps. "Detective Jonas?" she whispered, peering out. No one answered. Only the wind, bringing the echo of a door closing in the background. Mary felt her body freeze. She ran to the room phone, but the line was dead again. "No, it can't be," she murmured. She opened the nightstand drawer and took out the small penknife she used to cut flowers. Anthony woke upon hearing her. "What is it?" "Is someone here?" He tried to sit up, but she signaled for silence. "Stay behind me." The footsteps approached, heavier now. A shadow fell across the door. Mary held her breath. The doorknob slowly turned. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew open the balcony window, making the curtains fly. Mary turned abruptly, and at that instant Edward Taylor burst through the door, drenched with a pistol in his hand and a distraught face. "Nobody move," he shouted. Anthony tried to get up, but Edward pointed directly at his chest. "Did you really think you could humiliate me in front of the entire country?" he roared. "You ruined my life, Anthony." "You ruined your own," the millionaire retorted, his voice firm despite the fear. "You sold your soul for money. And what did you do?" Edward shouted, agitated. "You stole, you lied, you hid behind your employees. I only learned from you." Mary stepped forward, trembling, but with fierce bravery. "Don't you dare touch him." "Enough, Edward. This ends here." He looked at her with contempt. "You don't understand anything, servant. Poor people only serve to clean the floor where the owners of the world tread." "Then today you've mistaken your world," she said, with the penknife hidden behind her back. Anthony took advantage of a second of distraction to move aside. Edward noticed and fired. The sound echoed throughout the floor. The window glass shattered. Mary screamed and lunged at him. The bullet had not hit Anthony, but the echo of the shot deafened her. Edward struggled with her, trying to push her away. "Let go of me, you damn woman," he growled. She plunged the penknife into his shoulder. He cried out in pain, dropping the gun, which fell under the bed. Mary rushed to pick it up, but Edward pushed her against the furniture. Her head hit the corner and she saw stars. At that moment, the door burst open violently. Detective Jonas Rivers entered with 2 agents. "Police, drop the weapon!" Edward, bleeding and cornered, slowly raised his hands. "You don't understand anything," he said with broken laughter. "If I fall, everyone falls. Theirs goes much higher than you." The detective approached, pointing directly at his chest. "Then you start falling." Anthony, leaning against the wall, watched the scene with a pale face. Mary crawled to him, breathing with difficulty. "Are you okay?" "Yes, thanks to you." Edward tried to move again, but one of the agents fired into the air as a warning. The former lawyer let out a cry of frustration. "You won't arrest me!" he shouted, running towards the window. No one could stop him. He went through the broken pane and fell from the 8th floor. A brutal silence filled the room. Outside, the roar of the rain mixed with the impact. Mary covered her face, trembling. Jonas lowered his weapon, his expression grim. This is how those who think they can play with death end up. Anthony collapsed onto the bed, exhausted. All this, everything we did, was it worth it? The detective nodded. Yes, Mr. Matthews, but remember something. The truth always demands its price. And you've already paid with blood. Mary looked out the window. The rain continued to fall, washing away the broken glass, cleaning the stains from the floor as if it wanted to erase the violence. In the distance, sirens sounded again, but now they announced not death, but justice. Anthony took her hand with a tired and sincere gaze. Thank you for not letting go when everyone else let me fall. Mary squeezed his hand. Thank you for breathing again. The detective withdrew, leaving behind a destroyed room, a story closed with blood and redemption, and 2 souls marked forever. As the city lights flickered at dawn, Mary knew she had conquered something more than death. She had conquered silence. And in her chest, for the first time in years, there was no more fear, only faith. The sun slowly rose over the city, painting the rooftops with golden hues. In the silence of dawn, the sirens faded, and the hotel, still marked by the disaster, began to awaken. The news was already spreading throughout the entire UK. Edward Taylor, former lawyer for the Matthews family, dies after attempted attack. Cameras waited outside. But for the first time in months, Mary Smith felt no fear. She felt peace. Anthony, sitting in a wheelchair, looked out the window with a tired but serene face. I never imagined I'd see the sun again, he said with a quiet voice filled with gratitude. And much less share it with you. Mary, standing beside him, smiled slightly. The sun always returns, sir. We just need to have patience to wait for dawn. He looked at her with tenderness. Don't call me sir anymore, Mary. Today we are 2 survivors. She lowered her gaze, blushing. And 2 guilty ones for having seen too much. Anthony let out a light laugh. Seeing too much is the condemnation of those who open their eyes when everyone else prefers to sleep. Detective Jonas Rivers entered at that moment, with a folder in his hand. The judges have accepted the testimony. Anthony paused. The financial network is falling one by one. Beatrice will face life imprisonment and the others are being investigated. Anthony nodded. And you, Jonas? Mary asked. What happens to you now that it's all over? The detective smiled tiredly. Nothing ever ends, Mrs. Smith. But thanks to you, today this country believes a little more in justice. Mary looked at him with emotion. It wasn't justice, detective. It was faith. Days later, when the scandal began to subside, Anthony invited Mary to visit his old mansion. It had been closed since the funeral, but he insisted. They walked through the corridors that once smelled of death. Now they were filled with light. I want you to see this, he said, opening the door to the grand hall. In the center, where the coffin had been, there was a table with new documents. This is the new will, he explained. Half of my fortune will go to create a foundation for working women. I want it to bear your name. The Mary Smith Foundation. She was speechless. I can't accept that. You can't refuse, he retorted, smiling. It's not charity. It's justice. Without you, there would be neither life nor truth. Tears rolled down Mary's cheeks. I didn't do anything extraordinary, Anthony. I just listened to my conscience. Then the world needs more consciences like yours. The 2 fell silent, observing the garden that was reborn with new flowers. The wind blew gently, bringing with it the scent of bougainvillea. That afternoon, when they said goodbye, Anthony walked her to the door. What will you do now? He asked. I'll go back to cleaning houses, I suppose. It's what I know how to do. No, Mary. He took her hand gently. You're going to clean lives. You already did it with mine. She laughed humbly. And you, Mr. Matthews, will you go back to being the millionaire you were before? Never. His gaze was lost on the horizon. That man died on the day of the funeral. The one who woke up after that just wants to live, not accumulate. Mary hugged him for the first time without fear. It was a brief, sincere embrace of 2 souls who survived the same abyss. Thank you, he whispered. Thanks be to God, she replied as she walked through the garden. The echo of her footsteps mingled with the birdsong. In her pocket, the rosary beads she had held throughout the torment shone with the light of dusk. And she understood that true miracles don't happen in the heavens, but in the seconds when someone decides not to surrender. If this story stirred your emotions, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on this video. Every day we bring new stories that explore the complexity of life and the beauty of human emotions. Share your impressions in the comments. We love reading your reactions and knowing which moments touched your heart the most. And don't miss our upcoming content, where we will continue to explore the wonderful surprises that destiny holds for us.